Hopefully with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the social media platforms that appeared to just spontaneously sort of sprout out of the ground, how those social media platforms came along at exactly the time that the globalists wanted to, or feared they were losing control of the public discourse. And at the same time, they had pressing issues that they wanted to pursue and implement to do with forcing the globalist project on the Western world. So they had two things. They had this globalist project they wanted to force on the Western world, but they were losing control of the public discourse, the social media, or not so much social media, but the idea of online news that allowed people to comment on the news and they express their views on what was happening. That was changing the entire landscape of news, was making it interactive. And the globalists quite correctly realized that if they didn't take control of that space, then they would lose control of the narrative. And in order to implement the globalist project, they had to control the narrative. That's not a negotiable point. They had to control it. Now, if you look at the free-to-air television and say the print media at the time, and we're talking sort of early 2000s here, I guess, but that was, or previously had been, pretty much anyone that wanted to get news or access news had to go through those established media channels, the New York Times and the American Broadcasting Company, that sort of thing. Those were the sources of information. Now, because of the internet, the news was changing a number of ways. You could no longer be first to market with the news. The internet was always going to beat you. So how do you add value to the news to make your information still relevant, given that facts don't particularly matter anymore because the internet will always beat you to the punch on facts. So crafting a narrative means crafting an opinion, and so that becomes your value add, adding emotion and drama and so on to the facts, or even just using the facts as if you like a launching pad for the narrative, and then discarding the facts once you've got into the meat of the emotional drama and the narrative you're trying to spin. So news became dramatic value add infotainment and moved away from facts as facts no longer had value, given the internet was always first there. So that caused that change. But similarly, the need for the globalists to control the overall messaging out there about the globalist project and selling it to the people, and anyone that disagrees is a Nazi and so on. Now, I noticed this even before the internet had come on. So we're talking, I don't know, mid-90s or something now. I was noticing articles appearing in newspapers across the United States, or the Western world generally, but particularly the United States, where phrases such as people from the third world, they have a right to a good life too, and this thing, they have a right to come to the West. They have a right to a good life. They have a right to a well-paying job. They have a right to this and a right. And what right's that? And these things weren't explained. They were sort of asserted, and then as the article go on, and if you disagree with that, you are Hitler. So this was already this way of manipulating public opinion was already in print media and also on again the free-to-air television and the ABC and so on. There are also other articles were appearing which were completely made up. There was articles appearing about anti-gay behaviour, and there's one I particularly remember because I actually followed up with the author, the writer, the journalist who did the piece. He was saying that in some of there were some sort of parks around Sydney, and at night it was alleged that gay men went there for for sexual encounters, and that this was known to straight white males who were Christians and who liked Hitler and this sort of thing. So they crafting this image of the white supremacist Nazi. How come I never meet these people that are supposed to be everywhere? But anyway, so the journal. Remember, this is the 90s. This is before the internet had taken off. So this article said that these straight white boys would lie in wait for the gay men and then would beat them to death and murder them, and it was done very graphically. And then the boy jumped with his knees landing hard on the chest. The rib cage pierced the lungs, blood vomited and flecked from the mouth of the and so on. And then they kicked him, and then they did this, and so I'm like, wow, they killed the guy about 50 times over. Such was the hatred of these Nazis. Now, I didn't believe that had happened. It was too gory, too graphic, and I couldn't imagine anyone who'd be doing that. And the inference was, although not said, that these were sort of good middle-class boys who were going out and doing this, not the riffraff from government housing estates or something like that. So anyway, this was I at the time, this is going nearly 30 years ago. I contacted the journalist, said, look, you haven't given any facts. Where exactly was this place? The person was clearly murdered. Could you provide their name? I'd like to follow this up. I'm interested. It's oh, well, what do you want to know that for? Why? What's the name got to do with anything? Why do you want to know that? Oh, I don't have to talk to you, you Nazi. And so the person didn't exist. There was no such thing. It was a complete and total invention, just to do a pro LGBT, or just gay at the time. This LGBTQ stuff hadn't appeared, but to try and create the I don't know if you like the moral panic that gay men were being murdered left, right, and centre by evil white fascist Nazis, and it just wasn't so. These things weren't happening. That incident that he spoke about never happened. It was just a complete figment of the guy's imagination. Maybe he plucked it out. Maybe there's some international story somewhere that he'd found and decided to pretend that it was in downtown Sydney. Maybe that. But he just wouldn't divulge any facts and became very defensive and jumpy about it. And it's the same thing as the violence against women and all this. It's all done to socially re-engineer society. None of it's nearly everything is manufactured or exaggerated 40, 50 times over. Anyway, so coming now to when Facebook first became or was when I first heard about it, and I think I was in America at the time when I first heard it, so it's in the very sort of early days. It was, I think at the time, it was like a frat boy thing where they would have sort of an online chat thing about the hot chicks at the university. It was something along those lines, if my memory serves me, and it suddenly somehow became Facebook. Now, when I was first looking at it, it was, and I had an opportunity to get in early with an investment if I wanted. I knew the right people sort of around at the time. I looked at it and thought, well, hold on a minute, why, other than university or the frat kid type sort of, why would anybody really want to do that? It seemed pretty pointless and in its way quite banal. It just I couldn't see how it was going to fit. Some people were explaining to me, say, well, you can put on Facebook what you do every day, so you can say that you had cornflakes for breakfast or something like that, and just like keep a diary that's public and everyone can see it. And I thought, why the fuck would you want to make your diary public? I wouldn't. But anyway, I had a look at it and I thought, I can't see this is going to go anywhere. But what surprised me was the institutional investors. This is before it was being used. So the big money end of town, the big globalist organizations that we now know had heavy CIA and FBI involvement. These big institutional organizations really got behind it. I mean, really pushed it. It was really being pushed hard and being facilitated at every turn. There was no one who was pushing back. All the big shaker movers, all the big money, all the influencers were all getting right into Facebook to do it. Now, as we know, the key people around Facebook are super pro globalization and the globalist policies. And as we, again later saw, they're prepared to shut out and shut down any voices that do not accord with the globalist project and the globalist narrative. And it just seems to be maybe it's just an incredible coincidence. And Mark Zuckerberg's spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure Trump didn't win the 2020 election. These sorts of things. I mean, wow. How was somebody that partisan, not little partisan, or maybe he's got private views one way or another, but super partisan on steroids. And one has to assume he's been like that for some time, and he's been supported by people who also take that same view. So clearly, that Facebook, or in my view at least, was a globalist project from the outset. This wasn't just some rando thing where someone said that's a great idea. This was a device and a method of controlling the public discourse and the public narrative on social media, because social media is starting to take a bigger and bigger piece of the eyeballs, and it was allowing the public to comment on, and that effectively created or directed the discourse on many subjects that were important, critical, as the globalists perceived it, and they were losing control of that narrative and that discourse, and they had to. And Facebook, I believe, was one of those things was set up. Now, the next one was Twitter, and again, I came across Twitter, and it was I don't know how it started off, 40 characters or 80 characters or something like that, something, effectively a sentence really. And I looked at it and said, well, someone can post a sentence online, and I looked at that and thought, well, that's bullshit. I can't see that going anywhere. But again, the massive institutional investor support and the whole media landscape, as in the globalist control media, was right behind it. Anybody who was any influencer, commentator with a profile was on Twitter, whether it be movie stars or anyone else. But again, Twitter went the same path of Facebook. Now, it sort of got worse as time went on. But this idea of shutting down conservative voices, of artificially amplifying the globalist narrative, always the same. Facebook and Twitter, always the same, amplifying and boosting the globalist narrative, shutting down everyone else. And so you can hardly say it was an independent platform. And again, when you look at, say, Google and Facebook, not Facebook, YouTube, the one now, it's the same sort of thing. The most diabolical hatred of white people is tolerated and allowed to go through. The most terrible cruelty against animals in videos is allowed to go through. But make a comment about a certain election, bang, your video's out and you're shut down for weeks, if not permanently. So clearly political views that oppose, question, or challenge the globalist narrative and the globalist enforcement of their own unique reality, that isn't tolerated. And so you look at the investments that were made, again, the massive institutional investment. There was no natural organic market forces at work here, none. This was a decision made in globalist downtown central to say, these are the vehicles we can use to control the narrative and influence the narrative. And we're going to take control of those vehicles, just the same as we control what the New York Times says or what the ABC says or whatever, any of the other, MSNBC, CNN. We can control all of that. We need to control it. Now, there are a number of things going on at the time which must have scared the globalists. One was the Iraq War. Now, the Iraq War was a tough sell, weapons of mass destruction, all that sort of stuff. Now, the globalists had decided that they had to destabilize Iraq was one thing. Iraq was reasonably successful because they had Sunni and Shia and Kurds and that sort of thing. Not that there weren't brutalities and all sorts of heavy-handed stuff going on, but it was a reasonably successful state, quite prosperous in the overall scheme of things, and mainly due to oil, but nonetheless. But reasonably well organised, and of course, with a dictator at the head. But it was decided that Iraq had to go. They couldn't have a success story, with multiple faiths and multiple races in there. That couldn't be allowed in the Middle East, and so they wanted to create, or thought they could create, a democratic state there, and use that as a springboard for spreading Western values and, of course, the globalist project. It didn't work in the end. I mean, it turned into an absolute disaster. But they had no reason to go in there after Iraq, none, other than the globalists wanted to destabilise it. That was the only thing. So George Bush, George W. Bush, the globalist flunky that he was, he had the job of trying to sell it to the public. But without full control of the entire media landscape, it was a tough gig. And there were always people calling it out, and especially in the social media, questioning it. Well, where are these weapons of mass destruction? What's he talking about? The lies he's come out with, the total bullshit, and this sort of thing. And this sort of was one of the things that would have encouraged, or did encourage the globalists to say, we got to take control of the social media landscape. We can get the New York Times to say what we want, pump out the propaganda. We can get ABC to do it, but we got to control the fucking social media, because that's taking a bigger and bigger portion of the public discourse. Also, they wanted to spin the New Orleans hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Katrina, they wanted to spin that as a global warming event, but not everyone was going along with it. And again, we need control of the narrative here. The global warming thing, anyway, they wanted to really gin it up. And again, we're finding that tough. The people on social media saying, it's all bullshit. I mean, what a crock. And they couldn't have that. Those voices, those organic, natural citizen voices had to be shut down. And the conversation had to be directed in ways that suited and were approved by the globalist project. Other things to destabilise society, the LGBTQ thing was really starting to get some movement and traction there, and they really wanted to gin that up, same-sex marriage, that sort of thing. And they had to have, again, control of that public discourse, and Twitter and Facebook and Google were essential to the furthering and pushing of those messages. Also, the inability of competitors to get going, to get up and be effective competitors to the globalist approved information conduits such as Twitter and Facebook and Google. I have no doubt that the FBI and the CIA were involved in infiltrating those organisations and undermining them, so as they would not be a threat to, again, that information management system that the globals were created. The other thing was Barack Obama. They wanted Obama as president because he was certainly going to aggressively implement the globalist project on major parts of it, particularly the social re-engineering of society. So again, they needed control of the social media landscape to do that. That was probably one of their first crowning successes, really, the election of Obama, I would think, in terms of how they managed to get to the college kids and that sort of stuff. So when we look at this, we can see that I believe anyway that this control of the media, Twitter. There was nothing organic about Twitter. I mean, what the fuck was Twitter? But yet it was this huge success story, and as in the amount of funds it attracted and the amount of users and posters that it attracted. It was effectively led the news cycle, but that was created that way. The globalists created that as a creature to do what they wanted as part of their own control of the public discourse. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.